welcome to day 3, where we are, as Teresa mentioned, focusing on realizing you and realizing us, because we are all on these individual journeys of realization of ourselves, so we can live to our highest potential, be the person we are meant to be. But it's not happening alone, so we are doing it together with those in the room here today, with those other connections you have when you go home, in your workplace, your companies, your society, and together all of us evolve. So this is a very important day, because with the best of you, you can bring the best to your companies and the best to the society. And we don't want to waste any time not being us. So today we're going to have fantastic speakers. Again, another day with richness and amazing presentations and amazing conversations amongst all of us. And remember, as we talked about the first day, continue to be as open as you possibly can, to be quick to contribute, to be ready to connect, take some risk, never accept unacceptable behavior, commit, and of course, expect magic. Our first speaker today is Cynthia Milani, and she's the director of the Institute of Global Development Center for Neuroleadership and Diversity. She has more than 30 years of experience in neuroleadership and research on that field, traveled around the world, lived in Milan, but now she's based in Provence. Cynthia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Krista.
Big warm applause to Cynthia.
Thank you. And it is a great pleasure to be here. And today we're right. We are going to be concentrating on you, the individual. And we want to see what makes you you. And I'm going to start in by taking a look at the brain science behind that. But our real subject here is neuroleadership. And so the question is how can you, as a leader of a company or just starting out, once you understand your brain and how it works, how can you bring that into the company and into the leadership that you do? So this is actually second part of a presentation I made about 4 years ago here on neuroscience. And at that point, there were actually very few people in the audience who were familiar with neuroscience or the neuroscience of leadership. So I'd like to just ask you, would you please stand up if you do have a background in neuroscience or you are interested in the field and know a little bit about it. Please stand up. Well, wow. This is amazing, and hats off, because it is a new field. This is not what it looked like a few years ago. So, because I have heard some wonderful speakers already on the subject and of neuroleadership, et cetera, but I'd like to do a challenge and show that within about 10 minutes, I can show you a few tools that will allow you to go in and not only change yourself, but as a result, your teams, your company, and I am truly convinced it will also change the world. So let's take a quick look at you and your brain and see how it works, and leading with the brain in mind, what it is that you need to do to be a neuroleadership. And as Kristen said, she knew me from my life as an intercultural trainer and traveler, etc. But these last years, I have devoted it to the Center for Neuroleadership and Diversity. And we bring people from all over the world to talk about the subject of what makes a great leader. But we do it in the middle of lavenders, we do it in the middle of the roses. We get people to think out of the box. So, and we certainly invite all of you to join us in this nonprofit effort. But I'd like to talk a little bit about my journey of how I got there, because it actually began long ago. I was a student in anthropology, and I was extremely interested in the mind then. In fact, as a child, when they said, what do you want to be? Maybe a boy wanted to be a fireman. I wanted to be a brain surgeon. I had in my belly to understand how the brain worked. And that's what got me to Africa. And I was amazed at the power of these healers and started studying witchcraft. And how could they? And I saw people who could no longer walk because they'd had a curse on them. I saw people policemen who didn't believe it, who couldn't write. I saw people who traveled from abroad, foreigners, an Irishman, who said he didn't believe a thing, but he was dying, and they said, sleep on this rock. The next morning, he said, I woke up, picked my backpack up, and walked away. So when I went back to the US, I was very lucky to have as her last class in anthropology, Margaret Mead, as my main advisor. And she said, you need to take this to the National Institute of Health. They're looking at how can we use this in institutions, in healthcare, to be able to, the power of belief. We weren't talking neuroplasticity then. We were just saying, what is this belief thing? So we became part of a think tank that went into the hospitals to look at biofeedback and cancer. And could we actually change the results? And it was amazing to see a doctor go in. Before, we would sit in the medical staff's office, and they'd say, well, I don't know if this works. I tried it on patient X, and it didn't, but we'll try. He would go in and convince you, say, this is the greatest pill you could possibly take. I am convinced that it will help. And you know what happened? Yep, the rates went in. So we began saying, what could we do with this? So after a number of years of doing this, I decided to go into where I could have a different outreach and began doing all kinds of business trainings and leadership and saying, wait a moment, there is a cross, but very interesting. The people who hired me said, don't talk about that strange past of being an anthropologist and biology and neurology. We don't want to hear it. So I buried it until 2007, when here, actually in Italy, in Oslo, there was a presentation on neuroleadership by David Rock. He coined the term neuroleadership, and I felt it in the belly again. I said, this is it. This is how we change the world. This is how we make the corporation a much more ethical place. So we look at one of the things we do at the center is we really try to understand people's brains that we consider to be leaders. And what do you see when you look at these people? There is something that comes through. Anybody want to shout it out? What do you see when you look at a slide? What made these leaders so great? Empathy. They have empathy. They have understanding. They are listeners. They are caring. And they are leaders because they inspired. And I love this one, our latest dancing prime minister. But we could substitute her for our own Christian English. Isn't that what win means? You have chosen those words. That's Kristen. She got it. And so I don't have too long, but I have to tell the story of Kristen before I begin. Because we say in Italy, giù la maschera. Let me be honest here. Kristen was my intern 26 years ago, almost to the day that this began. And we had several interns, and we talked about a project where we could kind of promote the company and do some speaking, and we would invite Milan. We were very excited about this. And Kristen was one of the spearheaders on the committee. I will never forget it all these years, because one day we were at our business meeting, and Kristen walked in. She came bustling in. She picked up all of her papers. She said, I quit. She said, I'm going to take this idea, and I'm going to make it my own. It was mine in the first place. And everybody just sat there, and we went, okay, okay. Because that's what neuroleadership is all about. Melissa Gilbert wrote a book, and she talks about the muse. You grab it by the tail. She grabbed it. You could see it come in. Don't ever let it go. Follow your muse. And if you're a good neuro leader, you will move aside and say, go. So that's what it is about. That's what these leaders do. So when we look at the brain, we have here, I just want to give a fundamental understanding, because these are going to be your tools. And what you have here is Lucy. Anyone who ever saw the film with Johansson, Scarlett Johansson, she plays Lucy, same film. And it is based on Lucy, the Australopithecus. Now, we don't go that far back in our brain, but how much do you think has changed between these two? A great deal, right? Not really. And that's the amazing brain. It has remained basically the same for 200,000 years. But the research tells us that by understanding the brain, we can absolutely make amazing changes. Now, I'm going to show you how to do that in 6 minutes. Now, both of our Lucys obviously have their instinctive brain, which is where they operate. And this is the whole key to it. That instinctive brain is based on fear. Your brain is there to keep you alive. The rest of it is just free stuff. The first thing you have to do is stay alive. So you're going to respond to your threats. Now, the Lucy, all of us are Lucy. We have our prefrontal cortex, right? That's where we operate out of, because we're developed. Well, there again, nope. We've got a limbic system in between. That limbic system is based on something very important. Everybody know your amygdala? Okay, all right. So this is your whole key to neuroleadership. Let's take a look. What happens? Now remember, your brain is seeking out. You wake up in the morning and you think, what went wrong? I've been having these bad dreams. I'm working this out. How do I get past it? That's your amygdala. Your limbic system is starting to work. So the first thing is it's alerted when you're out to anything. Now, for old Lucy, it was about the snake. It was about somebody from another tribe coming in. Something that fears us today, some work we have to do and haven't gotten done. What happens is remember that prefrontal cortex, within billions of a second, you will first of all go to your amygdala. And when that happens, you're ready to run. Snake, rotting tribes, tiger. So your adrenaline, your testosterone, all of these things get going. Your blood is moving. We're scared. We can feel our heartbeats, right? So we learn to sing. We learn to do other things to calm down. But the reality is that takes 20 minutes. But there's another reality. It's still in your body, and it is still sitting there for up to 24 hours. So when we feel those attacks, and you look down and your belly's starting to go like this, it's registering it. So what happens is that we hit this constant circle of going round and round, and we can't get out of it. So what I'm going to show you now is how to move from that. And the secret is neuroplasticity, because I'm going to go back to that. This is the single most important thing I can tell you. The brain can change itself, okay? And that is what we are discovering, and that's what we discovered with my early work with voodoo, with all of these things, is how do we do that? So this is your first tool. And this comes from the seminal work by Shannon Murphy Robinson and her partner, Mary Clark. And they do a book called Neuroscience of Inclusion, which is one of the best, I think, out there on what to do with bias. And the reason is you've got this simple model. And what it is saying to you is when you feel, we know when we are in that state, we know when we're in our limbic system. You can, by becoming conscious, the more conscious of it you are, you will move to your middle brain state where you can begin to process it. The amygdala will begin to go through those emotions until it gets to that higher brain state. And that's where all the magic happens. So to do that, we want to first, these are the steps. First, you recognize that you are in an amygdala hijack, that you are emotionally not thinking, and then you take the steps to shift to your brain state and maintain and maximize it. All right? No magic here. You do it all the time. This is how you do it. It is yoga. We know that just meditation, remember all those parts of the brains you just saw? Meditation will absolutely smooth out the frequencies in all of that. It touches every part of your brain. So Harvard has studied these studies. You find them remarkable ones between the Dalai Lama and between the neuroscientists. They will all say the same thing. Go with what you're doing here. Music. We take a shower. Why? Because the brain goes off. And it's very important. Remember those neurons? You have 86 billion and another 86 glial, and they connect, all make magical connections, but they go in the same neural pathway all the time. You need to go off. You need to go into the woods. You need to smell the flowers. Doodling. Srini Pillai of Harvard. Same idea. Let your mind go with music to find new connections. Walk around like Steve Jobs. Take people for a walk. Because to do the 5 strategies, you need to do all of these wonderful things that we've talked about here. But I want to concentrate on just 2 of those in the last minutes. This is the SCARF model. I've seen it used before for some of these presentations. It's based on the work of, this is the Neuroleadership with David Roth. As a certified trainer for them, we use it all the time. And we know that if people do not get recognized, why do we have a company car? Why do we have Employee of the Year? That is extremely important. As a presenter, we get a low note, our status just crumbles. That's one of the keys. We need to have certainty. You as neuro leaders, you need to let people know what is happening. And sometimes what you know is you don't know, especially in a VUCA world. But that's what people need to talk about. Let them make their own decisions. Kristen, let them go. Because that's where you get the ahas. That's the inspiration. In a good company, you'll keep them. And relatedness, being part of a team, all of those different hybrid movings. These are the techniques that you can use, always with fairness, because we know that having the difficult conversations is one of the most important things we can do. Talk about it. We talked about that yesterday. That'll get rid of our bias. And I just want to remind you that with bias, it is, we have a needle here because we know that being excluded from a group, we register the same pain as we do physically with a needle. And 2 doctors discovered that because they each had up the MFRIs, and they said, but they're coming out the same. Get trust going. This is your oxytocin. How do you do that? That SCARF model, that's what we see as a child, and we need that same because the oxytocin is the magic sauce. Anytime you have a chance for inclusion, for conversations, for going where it's difficult, team meetings, and one of these last ones is when we look at Harvard Business Review, what they have looked at, wow, take a look at this. The new leader coming from America is no longer John Wayne. It's no longer that tough boss. It's the negotiator, the builder, the explorer. And who does it best? Women. Why? Because our brains are not radically different. My theory as a neuroanthropologist is it's changing. We're more and more similar than we were because our work tasks are different. But with women, you know, we have a passageway that we can use both sides of our brains, and we have more spindle nerves, so we have more inspiration. So all of these hormones, this, ladies and gentlemen, is the new company. And you as neuro leaders have those innate skills to not only create a better company, but you will get a following. Let me just go back to this. Mirror neurons is one way we do that. And this is the magic of WIN. A mirror neuron was discovered actually by an Italian and with monkeys, that when the monkey saw the banana, but in our case, when we see somebody come in, we know that the mirror neuron is going to respond. If somebody is unhappy, you're in a bad marriage, got a bad boss, guess what's going to happen? It's very difficult to break that unless you are aware of it, and it becomes a process. So those mirror neurons, we want to create one that is collective. And Kristen is going to come up and ask me a few questions and take my microphone away. So I'm going to leave you with this one until she gets here. When you look at this, what do you see? A fish or the background? If you see the fish, you're Western. If you see the background, you're probably Asian. Remember, the brains also differ according to culture, slightly importantly. Take care. You going to throw me off?
One thing, because you met...
I gotta go.
And you can catch her in the coffee break. Just one thing, you said something last year now, the Western versus the Asian, perhaps. But you have worked also a lot in the neuroleadership and diversity.
Yeah.
So as we evolve as humans, how can we best actually become all of that, both the Western and the Eastern, so to speak? Because we can, right?
Yeah.
One little tip on that. And
we are on the path. You've got this conference is what it is about. But it is also about the power that an individual can do by changing their brain.
Yeah.
And the last thing that I want to leave you with, too, is that it is our duty to get this out, to teach children.
Yeah.
It has to begin in the schools. It has to be so that we all know. I have a little grandson. I told him at 4 or 5. He went out, he kicked the ball, and he came back in and he said, well, Nana, I didn't do it. My brain told my foot to do it. They get it. So we need to bring that in. Social responsibility.
Thank you, Cynthia.
You're welcome. But